Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciations. There has been a very real attempt in recent days to co-opt Benedict XVI and his work for the document that we can't seem to stop talking about around here, Fiducia Supplicans. Yes, here we are, 3 months or so, almost 3 months, since it's been issued, and it just keeps turning up. I have suggested to the Vatican, through videos here, that if they want us to stop talking about this document, then the best thing they could do is to stop talking about the document and give us other things to talk about. If they stop bringing this document up through their constant defense of it, their attempt to invoke people who can't speak up in their own defense as an endorsement of this document, if they stop doing those things, if they stop trying to keep pushing this on us, eventually it will just fall out of the news cycle. And the shadow it has now cast over the entire alleged papacy of Francis will go away, as it'll be replaced by other things in the news cycle, good or bad. And yet, they keep bringing this up. And so it is my duty to bring this up to you. And here they have attempted to co-opt Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger before he was Benedict, to sell you this document. And this is being done through the infernal work of a man named Andrea Tornielli. It's not a name you hear very often on my channel, but he's one of the more important figures in the dicastery for the communications in Vatican City. Mr. Tornielli is the chief editorialist for the Vatican's dicastery for communications, meaning he writes articles for Vatican News and other things trying to sell the Vatican's point and their position on any issue of the day. And here his purpose is to try to tell you that Benedict XVI would have endorsed Fiducia Supplicans because it's a natural extension of his actual theology. Now, thankfully, there are people around still, priests, very intelligent, theologically minded priests who are also gifted with the ability to communicate to normal people around. They're still around who worked with Ratzinger and have utterly destroyed this argument. And we're going to go over the absolute destruction of it. But first, let's talk about the actual document itself. So, from Mr. Tornielli's article at Vatican News, which is sort of a PBS or BBC of Vatican City, we get this headline. Fiducia Supplicans, Non-Liturgical Blessings, and Ratzinger's Distinction, an instruction published in 2000 by the then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith distinguished healing prayers, ritual, and included in liturgical books from pastoral or spontaneous ones. The same criterion used now to admit the possibility of blessing irregular couples. Now, this is, of course, a lie. They're invoking Ratzinger, who was just teaching the basics of priestly duties of blessings, and they're invoking his logic on the different forms of blessings priests can give to sell you this document. Now, it's of course dishonest, but we shouldn't be that surprised at this point that Rome is pushing dishonesty in a very, very big way. And I'll demonstrate that shortly, but here we are again, 3 months after the issuing of Fiducia Supplicans, and they should take my advice. I have told them repeatedly in videos here, people mistaken me saying that have made the mistake of thinking I don't think we should talk about this anymore. I'm not saying that at all. I have said that if they want us to stop talking about it, do other things instead of continuing to defend it like you have here, because Andrea Tornielli speaks for Francis. He's one of the mouthpieces for Francis and the current Vatican. When Francis is gone, if a better pope comes, Tornielli will probably have to go on to do other things, to give you an idea. But let's see what he's saying here in his article. Quote, an important precedent regarding the distinction between what is liturgical and what is not can be found in the instruction from the year 2000, published by the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, signed by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger and approved by John Paul II. The object of that instruction is prayers to obtain healing from God. In point number 2 of the first part of the document, it is recalled that, quote, in the De Benedictionibus of the Rituale Romanum, there is an Ordo Benedictionis Infirmorum, in which there are several euchological texts that implore healing. In the final part of the instruction dedicated to disciplinary provisions, there is an article which states, healing prayers qualifies liturgical if they are included in the liturgical books approved by the competent authority of the Church. Otherwise, they are non-liturgical. Therefore, it is established that there are prayers for the liturgical or ritual healing, and others that are not, but which are also legitimately admitted. The following article recalls that, quote, liturgical ones are celebrated according to the prescribed rite and with the sacred vestments indicated in the order Benedictionis Infirmorum of the Rituale Romanum. From these quotations from the text signed by Ratzinger and approved by Pope Wojtyła, it is clear that the meaning of the term liturgical used in Fiducia Supplicans to define ritual blessings, different from pastoral ones, certainly represents a development, but which is part of the teaching of recent decades. Among the blessings there are other distinctions. Some represent consecrations or the seal of the sacrament celebrated by the spouses in the case of a wedding blessing. Others represent prayers or of invocation that rise towards God from below. Still others, this is the case of exorcisms, have the aim of warding off evil. Fiducia Supplicans repeatedly clarifies that imparting a pastoral or spontaneous blessing without any nuptial element to an irregular couple who approaches a priest or deacon does not mean and cannot represent in any way a formal approval of the union between the two. It cannot, states the document, be considered a, quote, moral legitimation for a union that presumes to be holy matrimony, nor for an extramarital practice of the flesh. The meaning is instead that of an invocation to God because he allows the seeds of good to grow in the direction desired by him, end quote. That is, of course, nonsensical. Ratzinger would never have endorsed such a blessing. You and I know that. Regardless of whether or not you like Cardinal Ratzinger, he would not have endorsed this because he spent a good deal of his time as Pope, and before that, again, as the prefect cardinal of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, a post now held by Cardinal Fernandez. He spent a good deal of his time working against this ideology in the broader world. So he would not have endorsed this. Obviously, this is mental gymnastics. These are word games they're playing. And you don't need to take my word for it. You can take the word of a priest who is still active in the church, a Monsignor Nicola Bux. He worked in the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under Ratzinger. And he knew Ratzinger's theological reasoning better than anybody else. And he shredded this statement by Andrea Tornielli. Now, it's gotten very little attention, obviously, because when Vatican News says something, it gets picked up by Catholic media. When Info Vaticana says something, which is where this was published, it tends not to. So we're now going to give you Father Nicola Bux's response to this, and I'm just going to give it to you in full, because I have the full text here. It isn't that long. So here we go. Here is Father Nicola Bux responding to this rather dumb thing that the chief editorialist for the Vatican wrote to try to sell you on a document that almost nobody seems to want. Anybody with the actual Catholic faith seems to want. There are no non-liturgical blessings by Monsignor Nicola Bux. Vatican News on February 27, 2024, published the article Fiducia Supplicans, Non-Liturgical Blessings and that Ratzinger Distinction. The title compares the recent declaration with some passages contained in the instruction Ardens Felicitatis of September 14, 2000, promulgated by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, Prefect Cardinal Ratzinger, with the aim of praying to obtain healing from God. This document was born from the need to bring order to the confusion of those years around prayer meetings and the healing charism. The comparison that the Vatican News article makes between the prayers mentioned in the instruction Ardens Felicitatis and the blessings of the Fiducia Supplicans is completely incorrect. Prayer is an insistent question, as the word itself indicates. Blessing is a formula of approval, well said, from above, that is from God. The Good Shepherd to whom the article refers does not have peace until he finds the lost sheep. He is not going to bless it because it has gone astray, but rather to take it on his shoulders, to bring it back to the fold, not without making it understand that it has gone astray. But let's go back to education. From the title, Instructio de Orationibus ad Obditem et Deos Senescentem, on prayers to obtain healing from God. My apologies for my bad Latin. The objective is explained, to invoke liberation from bodily and spiritual evil. No prayer can be made to God to confirm the state of sin into one which has fallen. In fact, the desire for happiness inherent in the human heart is always combined with the desire to obtain liberation from afflictions and to understand their meaning when they are experienced. The Ardens Felicitatis instruction also intervened to regulate the growing novelty of prayer meetings, which are combined with liturgical celebrations aimed at imploring God for healing. In not entirely rare cases, word of cure spreads. Therefore, the expectation of this and the interest in such meetings grow. In this context, a questionable healing charisma is appealed to. Meetings of this type, called to obtain cures, raise questions about how the ecclesiastical authority evaluates them, especially with regard to the liturgical aspect over which it must supervise and regulate, so that it is correctly regulated. To this end, the instruction introduces the doctrinal part on healing graces and to and prayers to obtain them. First, the meaning of illness and the healing in the economy of salvation. In the Old Testament, the sick person who begs God for healing recognizes that for his sins he is afflicted with just punishment. But illness also afflicts the righteous, and man asks God for a reason for it. Job's case is famous. It is a figure of Jesus Christ, in whose passion, according to the apostle, man can participate with his pain and even rejoice. Up to this point, the New Testament elevates suffering. See Colossians chapter 1, verse 24. Secondly, the instruction presents the desire for healing and prayer for it. Once the patient has accepted the will of God, his desire to regain health is fully human. He must not be discouraged, but pray, and the Lord will heal him. The document is not limited to the prayer for the healing of each believer, for himself and for others, but remembers that the Church raises this prayer, especially through the anointing of the sick, which alleviates and can cure illnesses both physical and mental, for the effectiveness of the sacrament, which is the announcement of the resurrection. The Epistle of James, in fact, shows how the prayer of anointing is not simply for, but about the sick. That is, it is an effective action as defined by the Council of Trent. The document presents three other aspects. Jesus himself exercised the charisma of healing, a gift of the Spirit that is also granted for some faithful. Healing prayers and tradition, and healing charisma in the current context. The second part of the instruction presents the disciplinary provisions. Article 2, prayers to obtain healing, he emphasizes, are called liturgical if they are found in the approved liturgical books. Otherwise, they are spontaneous prayers. As for these, they must remain distinct from the liturgical ones and not to be confused with them. See also Article 5, subsection 1 and 2. Therefore, they are not blessings, and they are not effective, especially if the believer does not want to abandon the state of sin. Also, the reference to the Ordo Benedictionis Infirmorum, present in the Rituale Romanum, in point 2 of the instruction, refers to the eulogical text, that is, the healing prayers contained in them, not the formulas of blessings that constitute instead the sacramental proper. Note the provision of Article 8, subsection 2, on the need for exorcism prayers to be kept separate from the celebrations to obtain healing, both liturgical and otherwise. Therefore, the Vatican News article commits a sensationalist oversight by questioning Ratzinger. Nowhere in the instruction is it spoken of blessings. If you like, the distinction between prayers to obtain and blessings that are or obtained is analogous to that made in the Eastern liturgy between deprecatory formulas and declarative formulas. It is unnecessary to clarify that the liturgical, from the Greek action of the holy people, is a public worship of the Church. The people of God gathered in the name of the Trinity. Non-liturgical, on the other hand, is the exercise of piety that the individual believer does alone or with others, but that does not involve the Church and requires its vigilance, so that it does not fall into hysteria, artifices, or spectacles. Liturgy and private piety are related to each other, but should not be confused. Finally, it is worth stating that the blessing, in Hebrew baraka, as a spiritual and sacred act, commemorates, praises the presence of God and intercedes, so that its power descends on the person or object and sanctifies them. The presence and the descent go back respectively to Christ and the Holy Spirit, as in the sacraments, the anamnesis and the epiclesis. The blessing nourishes and expresses faith through the sign of the cross and sprinkling with holy water. The blessing is a sacramental, that is an extension of the grace of the sacrament, which to be received requires a good disposition to receive the main effect of the sacrament to which it is ordained. Given that blessing is not compatible with the state of sin, one cannot bless what disintegrates, consumes, or destroys. To what sacrament is the blessing when a regular couple ordered? It is not true that the blessing does not promote or justify anything, because it implicitly promotes disorderly acts and a false union. In the text of Fiducia Supplicans, the expression blessings of double S types appears explicitly 7 times, but there is no double S type couple because they are similar, and similar does not make a couple. Therefore, there is not a blessing that is not liturgical, when it is made by an ordained minister, who exercises the munus sanctificandi with and in the sacred liturgy, in the name of the Church. The Vatican News article is therefore misleading and constitutes a blatant falsification, perhaps intended to please the court. That is a profound takedown of Fernandez's stance and his issuing on the document Fiducia Supplicans. The translation, as you saw on the words on the screen, left something to be desired, so I had to actually go and fix it a little bit. But it's clear. These are not blessings. They can't be. Because you cannot bless sin. You cannot bless that which displeases God. Even Fiducia Supplicans admits that much, but then tries to dance around it by changing the nature of blessings. And then here we are, 3 months later, invoking Cardinal Ratzinger, of all people, to try to sell it. Now, why is that? Why would they invoke Ratzinger? Because Ratzinger is beloved by many people, including people who are not nearly as conservative in the post-conciliar sense as he was. He is admired, and so they try to sell the document and what it does by invoking Cardinal Ratzinger. It's meant to quell the opposition, to finally calm the voices down. And again, Cardinal Fernandez probably isn't saying this, but maybe Andrea Tornielli is, since he works in the dicastery for communications. Or perhaps some transitional deacon or permanent deacon or a layperson who works for him is seeing this. If you are seeing this, if you want to get the conversation to change, stop bringing it up. Because as soon as you bring up this document again, we all are going to continue talking about it so that people don't forget about it. But if you stop talking about it, if we keep bringing it up, people will start going, ho-hum, what's the big deal? And I know this because that's what happened with Traditionis Custodes. At least until that dogma started becoming relevant in the news again. You see the pattern here? Let me know what you folks think of this in the comments, please. Hey, like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.